you gain after speaking affirmations over yourself. The more you hear it, the more you believe that it's true.
And welcome to Premier Fitness. I'm Gene Williams, your yoga instructor, and I'm here to tell you about the benefits of yoga.
Hi, hey, everybody. Thanks for joining our show, Where is the Love? I am Stephanie Hawken Hall, and I am your host. Welcome to my co host and my son, Gene Williams.
Hey, how you doing today?
Hey, son. I'm excited about this show, as usual. You doing all right today?
Doing great. How about you?
I am doing good. So, on this show, we talk about bullying versus love. Last week, we talked about truth versus lies. So, we educate you and provide tools and information to you about bullying and love, what real love is, and how to treat people with kindness and compassion. So, we just enjoy bringing this information to you because we understand that we have experienced a lot of bullying. And so, now that we've learned how to navigate through this life, you utilizing the tools that we have and that we share, we are happy to bring this information and give this information to you, right, son?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So we always do a recap at the beginning of the show. So last week on our show, we talked about two women who gained entrance into a middle school. They were saying they were going to the attendance office. So that's how they gained entrance into the school. So once they got into the school, they bypassed the administrative office, which is where they said they were going. They bypassed that office and went to a student and attacked the student. They were slapping and scratching and hitting the student. Um, and two other students were hurt as well.
Right.
So it was a 32-year-old woman and a 67-year-old woman who went into the school, again, attacked a student. The student was 12 years old. And this was a middle school student that they
Right.
attacked. The student who was attacked, her mom spoke out and said, "I'm traumatized. My daughter is traumatized. The school needs better security." You want to add anything, son?
No, you're very right. They definitely need better security, and that again, like I said last week, that's a loaded situation. I
Yeah,
mean, we discussed how it's never the right thing for an adult in a situation like that to attack a child, because of bullying. You use the the line of command. You go through the line of command to handle stuff like that. But attacking a child in that situation, you just really exacerbated a bad issue, made it a lot worse.
right. Exactly. So she said that the school needs better security. So, and we know that schools need better security when things like that happen. So, to hear more about that, because we don't want to talk about that whole thing, that's just a recap of last week's discussion and video. So, go back to last week's video and listen to it and check it out to hear that story and to hear the discussion that we had about it. So, and I wanted to correct something. Go ahead.
So to let us know what you think.
Yes, please let us know what you think. Um, so, I want to make a correction to something that I said last week. So, I uh, talked about, when you were bullied and how I went to the school and talked to the principal and one of the teachers. And then I said the next year I sent you to private school. And initially that wasn't what I did. Remember, I homeschooled you the next year.
Right.
And then the year after, we sent you to private school. So y'all didn't know that, but I looked at the video again. I'm always looking back at the shows to see what's being said. And so I saw that and I was like, ah. So I homeschooled him the next year, and then he went to private school the following year. And the bullying happened the first year of middle school, so that was all of middle school, and then um, it happened again in high school with students and teachers for 3 years. And then after 3 years, I addressed one of the teachers, and that teacher bullied me as well. So we put Gene back in private school again to finish out his last year of school because he wanted to quit school. And quitting was not an option, but private school was. So we put him back in private school for him to finish. So, um, and then I also failed to mention that when we touched on racism, that is verbal bullying. I didn't say that on last week's show. So looking back at the show, I was like, I need to let them know, let the audience know that verbal bullying, if you're talking negatively about someone, their race, their culture, their weight, their sexuality, their religion, or using demeaning language to embarrass or dominate and humiliate another person, that is verbal bullying. So, you want to add anything, Gene?
Nope, you're right on point.
Okay. So, that's the recap from last week's show and the corrections to the parts of the show that I saw that I wanted to correct. So, we are happy to welcome Curtis Brooks back to our show. He was on 2 weeks ago today, and he brought us and gave us some phenomenal information and tools to address our pain. And so he is back today to finish up something basically that he started and then to give us some more tools. So at the drop of a hat, Gene asked him to formulate a 5-step plan to help us assess our pain and address our pain. So Curtis gave us a 5-step plan. So Curtis, welcome to our show.
Hey,
Hey
hey,
Curtis,
hey there. Thanks for having
Hey,
me
how
again.
you doing, brother?
you
Thanks
are
for having me.
welcome. We are excited to have you back.
Absolutely. I'm glad to be back. Glad to be back.
So Curtis, tell us a little bit about yourself. You did on the show 2 weeks ago, but just tell us a little bit
Yeah,
about
absolutely.
yourself
Absolutely.
again.
Once again, thanks for having me again, both you, Stephanie and Jean. I appreciate it. And last week was such a great, or not last week, but the week before, it was such a great show. And I'm still just kind of thinking back on different things. And me and Stephanie, we talked a couple of times since then. But that being said, happy to be back. And once again, my name is Curtis Brooks. I am a men's life coach, speaker, and mentor. I help men communicate from their brokenness to wholeness so they can move forward and claim healthy relationships. So that's what I do, primarily working with men.
Thank
No.
you, Curtis.
Absolutely.
Um, so Curtis, I want to ask you, why is it important for you to coach men? Why is it important
Uh,
to you to coach men?
Right, right. Well, I think I said on a couple of weeks ago, uh, kind of a I'll probably just piggyback on what I said maybe like 2 weeks ago, and that is that this was my problem as a youngster, not having a male role model in my household. Excuse me. And there was my stepfather. My stepfather was there, and he was a great person, absolutely great person. But I think that sometimes mothers deal with. And obviously, I'm not a woman, but I'm thinking that sometimes a mother may deal with uh, giving the reins to a man who may not be the father, and again, whether it's spoken or unspoken, that may have been the issue. So even though my stepfather was there, he was an excellent provider, but for whatever reason, we just didn't make that connection, and it very well could have been me as well, being that, hey, who is this stranger in my household, that, so, I can definitely accept that. But for me, it was again, trying to make that connection, and probably, in more than likely, it was probably in missing my own father, my own biological father. Again, I don't know all the ins and outs, what happened with mom and dad when I was much younger, but nevertheless, it resulted in just, me not having that male role model. And mom was great. We had great conversations, but I think, again, as I said about a couple of weeks ago, every man needs to make, I think young boy needs to make the connection with his father. And there are just some things that a father can give to uh, his son that he can't get from a mother.
Yeah.
And so again, this became my problem, and trying to solve that problem for myself. Uh, it led me to coaching men, and ideally, to be honest, excuse me, this is not something that I wanted to do. Uh, it was something that really I just felt I needed to do. It's not something I just picked up and said, "Oh, one day I want to coach men," because being a man, I know sometimes it's difficult for us to talk,
Yeah.
and so it's not always easy. And we talked earlier, Stephanie, and that um, one of the challenges with men is that a lot of times we'll come almost to the very end of the rope before we say anything,
Yeah.
or if we say anything at all, it'll be another man having to kind of just hone into those things, those signs that sometimes that we see that other people may not see, and be able to hone in on those things and say, "Hey, what's going on, man? How you doing?" And again, I think men have to be you have to be comfortable with who you are,
Yeah.
because if you approach a man coming from a space of ego, being a man, if you approach him from coming from a space of an ego, "Hey, what's up, man?" and that kind of thing, it can be a turnoff, and it can make the other man want to be like, "Hey, what's going on with you?" That kind of thing. So you've got
Yeah.
two egos
Gotcha.
working, and one may not, uh the intentions may not to come off that way, but again, it really is. It's like, and I really would attribute this to my relationship with God first and foremost, because I think for me, God's word is just allowed me to work, or just my relationship with God has allowed me to work skillfully like a surgeon, and knowing how to approach things. And sometimes it's a great situation, and sometimes it's not so great, and meaning that I'm still learning as well. But ideally, it's approaching another man and say, "Hey, what's going on, man? How you doing? What's going on?" And just open that door, making him feel comfortable, because men as a whole, a lot of us, we have our guard up, and with reason,
Yeah.
and for again, that could be a lot of different things. But for me, back to your question, it was my problem first. I had this problem, and I needed to solve it for me.
Yes.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And then it's wonderful when you're able to solve the problem for you, and then your heart goes out to others that are
Absolutely.
experiencing the same pain or similar pain. It's easier for you to be able to share with them, and then I believe it would also be they'd be more receptive to
Sure.
what you're sharing, because you're not saying, "If I were in that situation, I would." You're saying, "I was in that situation, and this is." Um, and that's always made a big difference to me in my life. It's always easier for me to hear from somebody that has had the same experience or a similar experience, and
Sure.
they share that and how they came out of it, versus if I were, I would, because I've seen where somebody say, if I were in that situation, I would do this. And then I have seen it. They get in that same position and do something totally the opposite of what they said. And so now that I understand it that way, I'm like, oh, I just knew, maybe I seem rebellious,
Mhm.
to whoever, especially as a young adult or a kid, you know, um, hearing that from somebody, I may have seemed rebellious to them because I'm like, I couldn't tell them, well, I've already seen you say you do this, but you didn't. So I don't trust nothing you say. That was my kind of attitude. And so to those, that were over me, maybe adults or older, I may have seemed rebellious to them, but that was my way of thinking because of what I seen. And
Absolutely.
That didn't help me, you know. What helps me is knowing that you have experienced it
Right.
or similar, and
Absolutely.
then you're able to help me. So now my ears are tuned in. What you got to say, you
Right.
know?
Yeah, it's like experience is like an educational system,
Yes,
and it's like you said, it's easier to take information from a person who's actually lived it, who's
Right.
had to
yeah,
deal with the emotions and trauma and things that come along with a certain thing, as
Mhm.
opposed to a person who theoretically speaks on something they've never actually dealt with. So,
exactly,
Absolutely.
exactly. So Curtis, on the spot, formulated a 5-step plan due to Jean's question.
Yeah.
that be
um,
me.
and Curtis didn't know he had that in him, but it came out right when he needed it. And so Curtis is going to share more about this 5-step plan. Um, and so he first said, when it comes to um, pain, experiencing pain, he said, first you assess the damage. That was number one. Number two, he said, take ownership. Number three, he said, find someone you can talk to or trust. Number four, he said, prepare to do the work. And number five, he said, don't be afraid to make mistakes. So, Curtis, would you elaborate on those 5 steps, please?
Wow. Okay. Sure. Absolutely. Okay. For the first one, I used in my keynote. I was actually one. I want to say thank you, Gene, because you definitely pulled some stuff out of me, brother, for sure. I wasn't
My
prepared,
pleasure.
but it came out anyways. So appreciate you. But with that being said, as Stephanie just mentioned, there are the 5 steps that she shared with you, and the first one was to assess the damage. And years ago, I had well, many years ago, I was a youth, and I had a red bicycle. So for me, my key part of my keynote is again assessing the damage, and I use my story, the red bicycle. And so, with that being said, just try and make it quick for you. With that being said, I had was given a red bicycle for my birthday, and I don't remember how old I was, maybe 8 or 9, maybe. And I remember it was a Huffy, and it had the uh, the like the 10-speed handlebars. I'll put it that way, like kind of the curve S kind of
Yeah,
shaped handlebars, and it had the pedal brakes. And I remember I was just gleaning over that bike, and that was like the best thing. And matter of fact, I didn't even know how to ride, but obviously just being a kid, I seen other kids riding their bicycles, and I wanted one. And like I said, I didn't know how to ride the bike, and but my dad, my stepfather, he was absolutely eager to help me ride the bike. And so I remember as he was, just looking at me and watching me look at the bicycle, and the bicycle sat on his kickstand, and I began to look, and he's like, "Okay, well, what you gonna do? You gonna get on a bike or not?" So I got on a bicycle, and he's holding me up, and we start walking, and as he's holding me up, and he's telling me to pedal. And then so as he's walking, I said, "Well, how do I stop it?" I remember saying it to him. He goes, "Well, you just push back on the brake." And so he stopped for a moment, and we pushed back on the foot brake. And I said, "Okay, okay, that's," and thinking that's all I needed to know. And so here he starts walking again, and he walking a little faster. So I'm pedaling as fast as I could. My feet slip off the pedals, and then I catch my momentum and put my feet back on the pedal. The next thing you know, I'm looking down and just watching my feet as they're pedaling the bike, as I'm pedaling, and I look up barely, then I look down, and my I can remember hearing my dad say, "Look up, look up, look up." And I continue pedaling, watching my feet as I'm just watching this whole process going as I'm looking down my feet. And I happen to right as I was looking up, I remember I crashed into this metal pole and that was in the ground. And I remember when I crashed into it, had fallen off the seat and onto the bar, that middle bar there. Yeah, Gene, you feel me.
Look at Gene.
I've been there.
Right, right. Without saying a whole lot. But that being said, I remember I'd fallen off the seat onto that middle bar, and man, I was in pain. I remember the tears came down, and my father began, walking, and to me, it seemed like it took him an eternity to get there. And so, as many of us as boys or men, or we may have heard, boys don't cry, don't cry. And so for me, when my father approached me, I remember just that just that full out crying, and then he looked at me. He gave me this look, and I was like, I didn't know what to make of it. But what I did know, it made me go from a full on cry to to the kind of that whimpering, and as my mom would say as I was a kid, boy, you better stop that crying. I give you something to cry for, and then the whimper got even smaller, just got even a little lighter at that moment. But so to me, for me, and part of my my first point here, assessing the damage, what I assessed, what I read from that was that I wasn't supposed to cry. That's what I read from that. So, and that's why assessing the damage is so important. And obviously, it may not feel like damage in the beginning, but I would only find this out that it was damage years later. Obviously, again, I didn't know that at the time, but it was years later. This, as I like to say it, as the layers of life are peeling back, and especially when we start to get to that place where life is either, in most cases, life is not happening, and because that's when I think a lot of times the difficult questions or the challenging questions come to a lot of us, is when life, and what feels like life isn't happening in the way that we want it to happen or expect it to happen, and or the dreams that we may have had, whatever the case may be. But so here I was dealing with this question, what happened, and just at the time feeling angry. There was anger built up, and years later, the course of different relationships, this was a telltale sign. And again, not being able to express myself. And so, with that being said, it was anger. I was angry, because where do you go with all this?
Yeah.
Because you're told you're not to cry. And so, for me, again, as I got older, that's exactly what I found myself doing, is looking at that situation. So one being, assessing the damage, what happened, why am I angry, essentially,
Mm.
and so number two, there's yet a different story. For number two, there's I think I shared it with you guys. And that was the
Take ownership.
yeah, take ownership. Yeah, that's take ownership. And that was the story where I talked about I was learning to fly.
Yeah, flight school. I remember that.
Yeah, yeah, that's probably one of my favorite stories because it challenged me. It challenged me in a lot of ways, because here I was in a situation, and as I mentioned a couple of weeks ago, I was uh, headed to the airport, a small airport there. And I think it was in Greenville, Indiana, but nevertheless, a small airport there. And I got there. My flight instructor Penny wasn't there, and she was out having a doctor's visit. And then so here I was, in need of a flight instructor and trying to figure out who I was going to fly with. So I remember going to the chief pilot. She said, "Okay, well, you may be flying with me, Curtis." I said, "Okay, great." And I was happy to fly with her because again, growing up for me, it just didn't have a whole lot of relationship with men, at that time in my life. And so I was happy to fly with her. But then yet there was this gentleman, like I said a couple of weeks ago when I told the same story. This gentleman, I didn't know him, hadn't seen him in my life, but for the time I'd been flying at that particular airport, I'd seen him several times. But this guy just intimidated the heck out of me. He just scared the beheebie-jeebies out of me, and he hadn't done anything to me, but it was more of his stature. He was more of an just, he was tall and just he looked certain, he looked like he knew what he was doing, and only to find out he absolutely knew what he was doing. This guy was a former Air Force pilot with more than 26,000 flight hours, and sometimes those things that intimidate us, we start doing our research, so that I discovered that this gentleman definitely knew his stuff, especially in the area of flying. And I can remember saying to myself, man, I would hate to fly with that dude. I would never want to fly with that dude. Being that intimidation factor for me at the time. And so lo and behold, Penny comes back and say, "Well, Curtis, I don't think you're going to be flying with me, but give me a second. I'll find someone you're going to fly with." And guess who I was flying with? I was flying with this guy. And but again, trying to make a long story short, is that once I did my checks and did my run up, we took off, and as I mentioned a couple of weeks ago, we talked about the trimming the aircraft. There's a little dial in the center of the aircraft where you trim it, and it causes the nose of the aircraft to pull up, and you trim it backwards, and you're trimming down so the nose of the aircraft will go down. And so, in any event, as we had taken off, and I was trying to set my I think he asked me to go like 35 or 4,500 feet. And so as I was preparing to trim the aircraft, he says, "No, don't worry about the trim. I just want you to keep your hand on the yoke." So I remember looking at him, I'm like, the nerve of this dude, And again, I'm already kind of feeling intimidated by him anyways. And so, again, trying to make a long story short, by the time we finished, he was taking me through the routine, taking me through a drill. I can remember I was just sweating. I felt like I was sweating bullets. And when I landed that plane, and even when still to this day, when I tell this story, I kind of get choked up, because it was a time in my life when I landed that plane. It was the best landing I had ever done. Seriously. And again, that's number two. That's taking ownership, and
I
taking
want to
ownership,
interject something.
taking
So you
ownership.
did it afraid.
I'm sorry, what was that?
You did it afraid.
Oh, absolutely. 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 Did it
And
afraid.
sometimes doing it
Mm,
afraid, you do your best.
absolutely.
I just wanted to
Absolutely.
interject that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's an excellent point, Stephanie. Excellent point. Because I did it afraid, but at the same time, I was taking responsibility for how I felt,
Yes.
and not placing blame on him, but nevertheless, the very person. Life is interesting, because oftentimes the very people that we may be intimidated by for various different reasons, and sometimes not even valid, but nevertheless, that's our reason. And and oftentimes when we can find ourselves in that position. Just be prepared that in most cases that person has something that he or she can teach you.
Because you wouldn't learn
And
otherwise.
this was my situation, and I would venture to say that it probably will be 99.9% of most of our situations, because oftentimes the key to even what we're um, the key or the problem that we're trying to solve, it lies in us going up against those things that intimidate us, those
Yeah.
things that fear us. And
Yeah.
oftentimes the things that fear us, or the people that fear us, the answer that we're looking for is in their mouth.
Yeah. Ain't
So
that something?
yeah, this
Yes.
And you learn the most about yourself in situations that are tough and difficult. It's rarely ever that you get any vital information from things that are easy.
absolutely, brother. Absolutely.
I've been saying this to my classes this week a lot in my fitness classes.
Mhm.
I have a T-shirt that says, "If it doesn't challenge you, it doesn't change you."
Right.
So just going right along with what you're saying,
Yeah.
absolutely, you were challenged by a situation, you were intimidated, you allow that fear to propel you forward as
Yeah.
opposed to propelling you backward, and you made your best landing.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think for a lot of us, sometimes you just don't know, much in the same way that excuse me, a couple of weeks ago, you assisted in pulling this information that I'm actually now sharing with you all.
Right,
You helped, you helped to facilitate that. But my point is that oftentimes you just don't know what you have in you.
right,
Yes.
Don't know what you have in you, and it's just, it requires that stick to itness. You don't know what you have in you, and the best things will come out of us when there's the when there are the when there's the hardship. How oftentimes, or times with people and who have come to the U.S. many many years ago. Now their family is just all over, basically. Just foreigners or people all over the world have come to the U.S. knowing limited skills, limited English, whatever the case might be, and some of these people just have million-dollar businesses, coming to a place where there was hardship, and maybe learning to speak the language or learning a new skill, or it could be anything. But the point of it is that uh, as you said moments ago, Gene, is that we get our best, the teaching, the real meat of the situation comes from the hardship,
right.
and that stick to itness.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
That's good.
yeah.
So
So
now go
go ahead, go
ahead,
ahead.
Curtis. No,
No, go
you
ahead.
go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to go on with number three, and if you had any other,
No, go ahead with number 3.
excuse me. And
This
so
is
for
good.
number three is find someone to talk to and to trust. For me, that has been a huge piece, and for most men, and absolutely women as well, or just people in general, is that someone you can talk to, someone that you can trust. Again, that's hugely important, and the reason why that's important, because I think that, again, like I said earlier, or the question you asked me earlier, Stephanie, is that this situation for me, becoming a men's coach, it was my problem to solve. It was my problem to solve.
Yeah.
And in solving his problem, I I found the compassion. I found compassion along with it.
Amen.
I found the peace. I found the love that I needed to hear when I would fall in life or make mistakes in life. And from that, I would definitely attribute that to my relationship with God. So I found that passion. Again, this was a journey that I needed to take. And as Apostle Paul talks about the two becoming one, I needed to marry the two. The person who felt alone at times, who was in search of something, but then there's that spiritual side of me that felt loved again. But at the same time, they were at enemies of each other. But
Hmm.
again, it is where the compassion comes in life, where the two become one, and not necessarily in a man and a woman being married, but in a sense of the enemy that we're dealing with on the inside,
Yes.
and the God that loves us, that washes us clean, and that the two become one, and He accepts us for who we are. And again, coming into that understanding led me to really just, one, first, to be my own best friend, to be honest,
Yeah.
and to be that person that someone can talk to and trust, because I knew at times that I didn't have anyone I could talk to and trust. And so I think that it's important, to obviously important to find someone that you can talk to and trust, but it's also important to uh, make connections with people who are level-headed, if you will. It
Yeah.
doesn't mean that everyone needs to be a Christian or anything like that, but again, you the only way that for me personally, the only way that a person can become, and I'm saying that definitively, and I'm gonna stretch out there and step out on a limb, I'm saying definitively, the only way that you can actually um, come to a place where you can you can be your best friend. You can be able to be that person of reason. Is that you have to have gone through it yourself. You have to have been the person who was unreasonable at times.
Yeah.
And I wasn't always reasonable. I may sound like I am. I was, but no, I wasn't always reasonable. Trust me. I wasn't always understanding. So you have to be misunderstood.
Yeah.
And you have to come to a place where you're communicating to understand. And so in communicating to understand, you have to first know thyself. And in knowing
Yeah.
thyself, and I know again the question is find someone you can talk to and you can trust. Um, it just means that this number 3 here, it really is a delicate space, because sometimes you can be talking with someone who's not there themselves.
Yeah.
So it really is a delicate space, and I, in my short life on earth, I've learned that oftentimes people uh, made up in the best gear, the best suits, perhaps driving the best cars,
And the most in the turmoil.
living in the best homes, got contact lists of people who I would probably only dream to know. And I found out that these people, in most cases, they're just as broken,
Yeah.
If not more so.
Definitely.
if not
What'd you
more.
say?
Absolutely, Gene. Absolutely. And
What'd you say, Gene?
I said, if not more so.
Yeah.
yeah, so again, number 3 is really a delicate situation. And you just have to use some discretion in it. And it doesn't mean and coming to this space, so again, to number 3, it doesn't mean that you're going to find someone immediately. It doesn't mean that you're not going to get hurt in the process of finding or searching and connecting with that individual that you can trust and that can say, "Hey, I've got the scars too."
Yeah.
You know,
And something that I love about what you said also is you made a very important point, is that you have to be your own friend as well. Like
absolutely,
that's major. In order, like you said, in order to have understanding, you have to understand yourself.
yeah,
So it's a reflection of you. So I
absolutely,
appreciate that point. That's very, very important.
absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, I think that go ahead, Stephanie.
I want to add that when it comes to trusting someone else, they definitely have to be thinking on a higher level of consciousness
Mm,
than you are in order to help you.
Pull
mm,
you up. Yeah, absolutely.
absolutely. Well said. Well said. Yeah, yeah, that's really good because in Isaiah, excuse me, in Isaiah, he says that God says our thoughts are not His thoughts,
Mhm.
or our thoughts are higher than His thoughts. And so we absolutely need someone who can bear our infirmities, who understands, who can, who can come from a higher place of reasoning
Yeah.
than where we may be at that moment. So yeah, yeah, absolutely. That's well said. Absolutely. And
His thoughts are not our thoughts, and his ways are not our ways.
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Go ahead. I just wanted to say that.
Yeah, no problem. And then fourthly, prepare to do the work. And with this one here, I had another story, and I call that story the paper wad. And I wanted to use interesting names, but purposely. So, in this story, I actually was working with some youth many years ago with a business I started called Customized Behavioral Concepts. And so I was working with youth, and this particular day I had came up with this idea. The Lord had blessed me with this idea, and it said to take a piece of paper and ball it up in a wad and give it to this young man, in particular young man. And I did follow the instructions, and I said, "So, well, what I want you to do, I want you to take this piece of paper and throw it across the room." And he looked at me kind of strangely because, strange instructions. So that's what I told him. And he threw the piece of paper across the room. Excuse me. And I went to go pick up the paper several times and asked him to throw the paper across the room. And I went to pick it up, handed it back to him. He threw it again and went on for just a couple of minutes to the point where he just was like, oh, just got tired. And so, anyways, I just, went to pick it up. And this last round, I said, here's the piece of paper. At this point, he's exhausted about throwing his piece of paper across the floor, across the room. But on this last part, I said, well, I'm going to stand in front of him. So I stood in front of him as he was trying to throw this piece of paper. And as he was sitting down initially, throwing a piece of paper, now I'm standing in front of him. He's still sitting down, and he's trying to throw this piece of paper. Now he gets to a place where he's standing up. He's getting frustrated now because I'm blocking any attempt that he would need to, throw this piece of paper freely as he was before. So I'm blocking these attempts, and he's getting more frustrated. But before I allowed him to go to that space where it took him over the edge, I stopped. And I began to explain to them that when you can't express yourself, we get frustrated. Much in the sense, the story I was sharing with you earlier about me assessing the damage is, obviously when I became older and felt that I couldn't cry. And the natural response for me, and where it is with most of us, we get angry. Again, it turns, because what happens is that with anger, the anger facilitates itself outwardly, but it takes place on the inside. And the expression is an outward expression, but initially it takes place on the inside. So a person becomes angry with themselves first. Themselves. And so again, that expression is done outwardly to express ourselves, obviously, again, at the thing or our anger, maybe not being able to say what you felt like you needed to say or you wanted to say, or being able to cry. Again, the anger is turned inward. So here it was with this young man. Before he could get to that space where he could be fully saturated with the anger, I stopped. And it was such a profound story because he ended up writing me a rap song. And I don't remember, since then I've moved and a lot has changed in my life, but this young man was absolutely very impressionable. He ended up writing a rap song, and it just brought tears to my eyes because at that very moment when I said, okay, I'm going to stop, he found his way to express himself through rap. But yet I kept in contact with one of the ladies that knew him. And she was saying, Curtis, I don't know what you did to him. I don't know what you said. But this young man is, because he was a troubled kid in school. This young man completely turned his life around.
That's awesome.
Wow.
So, but yeah, that was that was a great story, and it was a great story, and that was a great situation again, or at least the scenario that I was able to put together. Because again, not expressing ourselves is difficult, but
Yeah.
but when you see the difference in expressing yourself as opposed to how you felt when you weren't able to express yourself, I think right away you can see the freedom. You can see the freedom. You see the option that you have. And I think, he chose the option to be free and to do the work, that whatever that work may have been for him. He chose the option to do the work. And that's what freed him up to, become the great young man that I heard that he had become, and just doing away with the stuff that he was doing before, and becoming a nuisance. And he became just not necessarily saying that someone needed to sit down and just comply with everything, but he became that respectful young man that I think that he knew that was in him.
That's
So
awesome.
That's awesome. That you taught him a different way to express himself.
absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
And lastly, it is number 5. Don't be afraid to make mistakes. Life is full of mistakes, full of
Yes.
decisions that we have to make, and obviously not always the right decisions, not always the right company we keep with people, whatever the case might be. But nevertheless, it leads us to making some mistakes and things that we might regret. And this actually just came to me. Another story came to me years ago. I had a Mitsubishi Galant. It's my first car. It's many, many years ago. I was a teenager, and I remember I was working at a bank at its processing center, and the Mitsubishi Galant was owned by an older couple. This is what the salesperson had told me, whether it was true or not, but that's what he told me. It was owned by an older couple, and it wasn't new, but it had low miles on it. I think it 24,000 miles or something like that. And so the car was very dependable, had nothing wrong with that car whatsoever. And um, I remember talking with my friends at my workplace at the bank I was working at, and they were like, "Curtis has a family car. It's a Ford vehicle. The Galant was a Ford vehicle." And so I remember the friends at work, the coworkers, they were like, "Curtis has got a family car." And at the time, I was single and no kids or anything like that. And and I don't know why. Didn't think it bothered me, but I guess it did. So next thing you know, I went and traded my car in for a Mustang. And here I was, I know I'm a nerd. That's just what it is. I'm a nerd, but and, and, and I probably was a big of a nerd, maybe not so much a nerd, but a little less of a nerd than it when I was younger, but at least that's what I thought. But nevertheless, so here I was driving this nice Mustang, and nice black Mustang, 2-door, powered windows and sunroof, and here I was doing it. Now I changed my whole scenery, so change the whole situation. I don't have a family car, but that car gave me the most trouble. It gave me some serious trouble, and I seriously went into a tailspin. I mean, it was my first time leaving home. I think I was 18, 19, maybe about 20. I finally moved out the house, whatever. And so had my own place and didn't need to call mom for a ride or my sister or beg for a ride. Had my own vehicle, and I traded this car in for a Mustang that was a piece of garbage.
To
Just
please society.
Right.
Yeah, it was a piece of garbage. And
No, I said to please society.
yeah, exactly, the police society, exactly. And so that being said, I'm still talking about don't be afraid to make mistakes. So that was one of the biggest mistakes that I made as an young adult. And that thing haunted me for a long time because I was, fresh and ready to live life. And here I was now back to a place where I was feeling like Mom, can you come and pick me up? You know, what time are you going to be here? And things of that nature. And just having felt I had grown up and was ready to live life, and now here I was back at square one. It was absolutely disappointing for me. It was at that time. But the point of it is that mistakes are absolutely part of the equation.
Yes.
They are part of the equation. And if it were that I could have uh, created a plan and factored in mistakes along the route, along the way, okay, in 2 years I'll make this mistake. Okay, I'm going to factor that mistake in. It's impossible, but the
Yes.
only thing you can do is be prepared and know that you really can't prepare for the mistakes, because sometimes thank you, sometimes all of your goodness, all of the good efforts and your good deeds that you may see yourself doing or have shown to other people, and sometimes it doesn't always equal out to good being returned to you.
Oh yeah.
And I think that's absolutely powerful, because I think that we, in our minds, sometimes we think or we want to believe, and it's nice to believe that. But the reality of it is that we can do good, we can do good, we can do good, we can do good. But it does not always equal out to good deeds being returned. Maybe not from that particular person, maybe not at that particular time, but rest assured, there comes a time when we keep working at it. There comes a time that the it's like a basket, if you will, that at some point it doesn't seem like nothing it's ever going to fill itself up. But if you keep falling along the lines of what your heart is, in line with what your faith is, and treating people as you would like to be treated, and again, one, as I mentioned earlier, assessing our own damage. This is where I'm broken at. I think a lot of us have had enough relationships, or perhaps worked on many different jobs, even if it's one job. But the point of it is that I think enough of us have seen life, have experienced life, whereas that either we've heard from someone either has said something to us, maybe in joking, but in our own hearts we knew something, there was something,
It
truth in the
resonated.
statement. Or we've been in relationships with someone where maybe in a theory of arguing or back and forth, different things that were said, that the person said something to us that felt like it cut us like a knife, and there was some truth in that. We may have been angry, but there was some truth in that.
Yeah.
So I think at every juncture or every turn, there has been truth spoken to us. And whether we want to receive it or not, because sometimes the messenger comes in a way of a person we may not even like.
Right.
Those are the
That's
most poignant
exactly.
messages.
What'd you
Absolutely.
say, Jean?
I said, and those are the most poignant messages because you have to step outside of your ego
Yes,
to even accept the truth that they're giving you, whether
Yeah.
absolutely.
it's constructive or destructive.
Absolutely. And so again, my point is that regardless of whether you have climbed Mount Everest or whether you barely come out the hood, it doesn't matter where you've been. The point of it is that truth has been there, whether we liked a person or we didn't like the person. But oftentimes the truth is spoken in the most challenging situations in life. Truth is spoken to us. And we may or may not want to hear it, but that is in fact an opportunity for us to assess the damage. Not
That
because you don't like the person, but as Jean mentioned earlier, to step outside of that. And again, to assess the damage, because in most cases, we've heard it more than one time.
Oh, yeah.
You know. Um,
absolutely.
Secondly, take ownership. Own that. You might go away like, just, ticked off at the other person. They may not know it, or they may know it, but find somewhere to, sit down and deal with it.
Yeah.
Say, this is mine. This is my stuff. And I think importantly that as long as you leave the fruit on the tree, and at those different times, again, whether we like the person or those challenging situations, though they may come and go, you've got to pick that fruit, because when it falls to the ground, it gets stepped on. It's all over the place. Now it's a matter of trying to pick up the pieces, find out where the trail leads, who the trail leads to. So life gives us an opportunity to pick the fruit of ownership while it's ripe, while it's on the tree, ready for the picking. Again, taking ownership. And number 3, find someone to talk to and trust. Again, I know, as I mentioned earlier, that's a delicate situation, because as you said, Stephanie, that you need to find someone who has been there and who has a little bit more experience that we have.
Yeah.
Number 4, prepare to do the work, because that person, in some cases that you can trust, they've maybe given you some tips, some suggestions, ideas on where to start from, or how to start, or a good book to read that's going to help us get on the right track, or a different perspective other than our own. And then finally, like I said, don't make mistakes. We can't write mistakes into our plan. We can only be ready for them when they come. But also know that if you can be ready for the mistake, or at least prepared to deal with a mistake, you can be prepared to also bounce back and get up and remember what the journey is about.
Right.
I want to add. Go ahead, Gene.
Ladies first.
No, you go.
Ladies first.
You go.
Well, I was going to say, there's a popular saying, is becoming cliche now, is that we have to learn how to not look at mistakes as mistakes. You look at mistakes as lessons. It's an opportunity to learn. You tried it this way, it didn't work. Come back, you reassess. One of my favorite sayings in the Tao Te Ching by Lao Tzu states that it's better to measure 10 times and cut once than cut 10 times and measure 1 time. So, yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love that. Absolutely. Absolutely. But, here's a thing that's really quick, Gene, when you say lessons, because see, think about this now. If you are an electrician and you know that in order to handle this particular switch or build this, I don't know, I'm not an electrician, but maybe that's not the best example. But the point of it is that if you're putting something together, connecting wires and things of that nature, there is, some people could say, oh yeah, there's different ways of doing certain things. And it very well may be as an electrician, but there are times in life where and I've heard that, what you said, don't look at them as mistakes, but look at them as lessons. But in order to, my point is that there is a way to do things. There's a way to do a certain thing, and that's going to give us the results we're looking for. And if you get a chance, look up the word science. Look up the definition for science.
Oh, yeah.
Science is essentially a person holding a particular theory, and it's under their obligation to prove this theory right. Prove this theory right. And that if I put A, B, C together, it's going to produce these particular results. And so once it's put together, again, the person, me, you, or Stephanie, being that I have to prove this now. And once I prove it that it's true in this situation. It's going to give me the results that I'm looking for because I put A, B, C together. But if I come yet another way and trying to prove that this works, but yet another way, it's difficult for me to prove it that it works because it's been proven by ABC. And so my point is, if I'm making any sense, my point is that there has to be there has to be a way, because if a person creates a medicine, a doctor creates an antidote for something, and the people are healed, but at the same time it destroys their kidneys. That's something that you might need to take back to the drawing board, or and again, can we label those things as lessons? Sure. But maybe there are mistakes that, maybe I put too much of this in there, or I need to lessen this, or whatever the case might be. So I think that my point is, I think when we identify them just as mistakes in a sense, we're not beating ourselves up now. This is the whole point of it, is we're not going down on ourselves. And I think when when we're not calling those things as they are, this is what this is. This is a failed relationship. This is me not being my best. More than just a lesson, this is me not being my best. This is me assessing the damage. This is me calling, I felt like I wasn't allowed to cry. So it's being specific rather than saying it's just a lesson, because if it's just a lesson, it's just a lesson. So we need to be able to identify the challenging component that made the lesson go wrong, or where it didn't produce the certain results. So I just wanted to share that with you. Hope that makes sense.
So would you say learning from the lesson is from whatever the mistake is real? And in other words, and to keep from repeating something, we need to learn from it so that we don't continue to make those same mistakes again.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's my take on it, but I think it's important to identify, because Gene, you as a fitness instructor, there's a certain way that they do certain exercises, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And so for the person to come in and say, well, I'm going to do it this way, but you as a fitness instructor and professional, that if they're doing it this way, it's going to come out with the right results. The results results that you're looking for. They may not see it yet, but if you do it at ABC, however it goes, they're going to produce a certain, a certain look, or whatever their body's going to begin to form in certain areas. But yet they may want to do it.
Outcome.
Yeah, exactly. A certain outcome. So they may want to do it their own way, but again, you can say, well, there's lessons learned, but for a fact, that if you do it this way, so it's more than just a lesson. It's just the person not wanting to follow the instructions, and eventually you as a professional, what to look for, and they may not know. But again, I think it's just important that being able to make a difference in being that life is absolutely full of lessons, but there are the mistakes that come first, and then there are the lessons learned from that. If that makes sense.
Yes. We are out of time. We have enjoyed you on our show, Curtis.
Absolutely.
You gave us some more things to chew on, some more things to think about. And we really appreciate you being on the show. Gene, any last words?
No, it was a great show as usual. Thank you again, Curtis, for coming. Thank you for the tools you blessed us with. Thank you for your insight. And thank you for everything. Thank you again for coming.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, man. I appreciate you. Thank you.
So we want to say we leave you with peace, we leave you with love, and we send joy to you, our audience. Thank you for joining the show. Thank you for being a part of the show. Until next time, bye for now.
Ciao, everybody. Bye.
So,